Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode. Today, I'm joined by my good friend Alina here, your top go-to German journalist covering all things around German football and just football overall in both German and English. Alina, how are you doing today?
I'm very glad these days, and yeah, thanks for having me.
Good. Love to hear it. Today, Alina is joining me for a very, very fun chat after there has been some rumors going around, or maybe strong rumors even. Would you even call them rumors at this point? To talk a little bit about Harder and Harder and Magdalena Eriksson's very close deal to Bayern. Obviously, both of the Chelsea duo, Magdalena Eriksson, their captain, and their star forward, Pernilla Harder, are close to securing a deal now with the German Giants, Bayern Munich, as both their contracts expire this upcoming summer. Obviously, skipper Eriksson joined the Blues back in 2017 from Linköping, whereas Harder, who actually came from Wolfsburg in 2020 on a record fee at the time, now obviously being linked to their rivals, which is quite interesting. And the race has been reportedly Lyon, Real Madrid, Angel City from the NWSL, as well as Bayern, who look like to be winning the race. There's obviously multiple reasons why a club like Bayern could be winning the race and beating the other teams, and one of the major one has to be how their current system is set up and the tactical play that they like to just display. So, Lena, in your opinion, or from what you have seen, from a tactical perspective, how would both of these players fit into the current system where they're able to shine out their potential and just their individual skills?
Definitely, I think we can also like expect some departures. I'm pretty sure that Saki Kumagai will leave the club, and then we just need more depth in defense at Bayern. That's something they flagged during the season, and I think bringing in Magdalena Eriksson, that's something that will really help. And I think she will fit very well as a center back pairing with Glodis Perla Vigosdottir. Also, like, it's a very flexible back line, so they can do a back four, back three, and I think she works great in both systems. And for Pernille Harder, I think it's great that there's a great playmaker coming for the offense of Bayern,
Hmm.
because I think that's something that's also lacked in the previous games. I think a lot of players in offense were tired, were a bit like exhausted, and didn't live up to their like normal form of like what we were used to see from them. And I think it also like it gives more squad depth and more options to be more flexible, to do more rotation, and overall to have a better squad for the upcoming games next
Yeah,
season.
rotation is a big one, and you just mentioned
Definitely.
that there's going to be some players that will have to make way out. Is this kind of like a necessarily thing that you expect to see, that if these two big names are coming in, obviously they're coming in with expected minutes, that is definitely going to force some players out? Or do you think it can still be managed with rotation, considering that there is going to be a summer transfer window with more players probably coming in? Or I'm sure you can probably expand a little bit more on the players that are out of contract, and how do you see that going as well?
Yeah, I mean, there's players leaving, there's players coming in, surely, and I think it will be a good balance. And I think it's something that Bayern have to learn right now, that not every player can start in every game. That's not good for them. There needs to be rotation, and but you also need the competition in the squad, because I think that's really good for the team spirit and like for how Bayern plays.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's something they haven't done a lot recently in the past years. There was a pretty much fixed starting 11 and not that much rotation or not that much squad depth. And I think that's something Wolfsburg have done really, really well. If you look at that squad, that's insane. And I think that's also what took them to the Champions League final in the
Yeah.
end. And I think that's something Bayern also like want to implement right now.
Is that something that you could say is maybe the slight difference, or that minor difference between Wolfsburg and Bayern? Obviously, Wolfsburg had beaten them just 5-0 recently, made it to the final. Bayern did beat them earlier on in the season. I think Bayern is one of the few teams that could say they just beat Wolfsburg and Barcelona in the same season. But clearly, these losses are kind of more towards the end of the season. Could that be something that it's attributed to, and something that they're looking at where maybe it's strengthening that depth, and making sure that you can rotate a lot better?
Yeah, definitely. Bayern went to it was two Wolfsburg games within a very short time
Mm.
amount of time. And the first one Bayern beat them 1-0, and the other one was a 5 nil loss, and Bayern both had the same starting 11 for both games. And I think in the second game they were a bit too predictable for Wolfsburg, and Wolfsburg could just do whatever they wanted to do on the pitch, basically.
Mm.
It was crazy to see. And I've also seen like a pattern in the Bayern, like in how a season runs for Bayern, that like they have a great start into the season and like win a lot of important games, like be it against Wolfsburg or like in the Champions League, great games.
Yeah.
But then like players get injured, players get exhausted, and then players drop in form, and then the squad gets shorter and shorter in size. And that's what happened last year also, like when Bayern were knocked out by Paris Saint-Germain in the
Mm.
Champions League quarterfinal. And then also like the week after they suffered a very bitter defeat, like 6-0 against Wolfsburg, and squad was hit by COVID-19. It's like, and also injuries. It's like it's the same pattern, and we had it this year also, like that
Mm.
players were injured and exhausted and stuff. And I
Yeah.
think by bringing in players like Harder and Eriksson, you can really like prevent these things from happening and like really really break that cycle.
Yeah, it's really interesting you say that because Emma Hayes, who's currently working with both the players that we're talking about, has always had a big emphasis on like your peak time needs to be at the end of the season. So obviously these players are coming in with that mindset because they have been there for the years that they've been, especially Captain Eriksson, who I'm sure on the field and in the back room is also the message that she's trying to put across. Given that leadership role for Eriksson and giving that experience with Pernilla Harder, do they walk into the starting 11? Is that something you think they're discussing? Obviously, Harder has unfortunately been quite injury prone, really, the past 2 seasons, especially this season. I mean, she's missed what you want to say, like 2/3 of the season so far, only making her comeback now, which she's looking as sharp as ever. It's like she never even left. So do they walk in? Do you think there's going to be a transitional period? How do you kind of envision that happening?
Long term, I can definitely see them being part of the starting 11, but I think in the beginning it will be more of a transition period. You need to also keep in mind that they will both hopefully come from the World Cup and like
Yeah.
having played a lot of minutes and then also like a lot of minutes with Chelsea. And as you said, Pernille Harder being injury hit at Chelsea, and I think that's also something that she needs to adapt at Bayern, like getting a steady fitness level and also like adapting to the level of the Frauen-Bundesliga again. Of course, it has changed a bit. She
Yeah.
was gone for a while, but of course the league has changed. There's new teams right now, new players and stuff. The dynamics have changed, and of course that's something that you have to adapt. I think you don't walk into any league in Europe right now, and I think a transition period is good for both of them.
Yeah. Would you assume Pernille Harder is going to have an easier, quote unquote, transitional period than possibly Eriksson purely because of her time at Wolfsburg? And it wasn't even like a brief time where she just was there for a few bit. I mean, she was a very important role during her time at Wolfsburg. I think she was called by many, and rightfully so, like one of the best players in the world. Her experience in that from Bundesliga, and given that the league has changed and developed massively in the last few years, how do you see that transitional period? Do you think she'll slot in? Do you think she will still kind of struggle with those injury prone bits here and there, or will it look a lot smoother because of that experience?
I think it's difficult because it's like two different positions. I think
Mm.
it might be a bit easier for Magda to get her, like for Magdalena Eriksson to get her starting position
Mm.
in the defense, because like Bayern a bit of are at the moment a bit short of defenders. And I
Yeah.
think if you look into the midfield, how many high quality players there are, it's crazy. And that you like there's Lina Magul, there's Sydney Luhmann, you have to bench one of them. It's crazy, but
Mm.
I think it's difficult to say how the transitional period will go or like who will have an easier start. I think
Mm-hmm.
the club will do the best they can to make them a good start here in Munich,
Yeah.
and I think it will go well.
Yeah, you just touched on the midfield. Obviously, how do you see Harder transitioning into this Bayern squad now? There's going to be some changes possibly in the summer with new players coming in, leaving. But do you think she's going to have more of a forward role with where maybe she's playing more of a double striker with Schuler? Sometimes we did see that happening during the Wolfsburg days where she was the lone striker. Will she be able to drop in with Lohman and McGull? Or even if that is the case, is there going to be different scouting or positions that Bayern would be looking to fulfill? I mean, how do you see Harder fitting into the squad where she's able to, show her full potential and kind of, 2 seasons ago, been a lot harder with some crazy numbers that she was able to pull?
I think it's difficult to tell, like offensive wise. Bayern have threats on every position, and I think they want to keep that up. They are not the team to form around a certain player
Mhm.
that also makes them like vulnerable if that player is injured or something.
Yeah.
And I think they will give her a free role to some extent, but like also like I think shifting her around a bit, like up front and then like behind the striker probably. I think it's very unpredictable, but I mean that's what makes her such a good player. She knows where she needs to be, and I think Alexander Strauss, the head coach, is a very smart head coach, and he knows what he's doing. And I think they will find a very good role for her in the squad.
Yeah, I mean, and the players have been very complimentary of his style. He's only arrived here last summer, but even last summer they got a new manager, a few more players. Obviously, one of the big ones that has again slipped into that midfield role is Georgia Stanway. Clearly, some big investments, big numbers being paid for some big players to come in and join. Is this a trend? Is Bayern kind of closing that again, like small dash of wanting to go into for a Champions League final? Obviously, Magdalena Eriksson has been in a final. She was the only and first Swede to captain a team in a final. I believe Harder has also been in two finals with Wolfsburg. Didn't unfortunately win either of them. Are those two players being brought in to as a bit of reinforcement of, hey, we are another German side that should be also going into a final?
Yes, 100%. I think that's something that's been on the radar for Bayern for a while, like coming really far in the Champions League. And I think being knocked out in two consecutive quarterfinals was really disappointing given the quality that is there in the squad.
Mm-hmm.
And I think at some point a semi-final would have been the maximum goal for the season. And I think like giving that key players like Sarah Zadrazil and Leah Schüller extending until 2026, I think that gives them a really good chance to make it really far in the Champions League, and why not win it? I mean, let's see who else joins in summer, and I think there's a real chance that they can win the Champions League within the next 2-3 years.
Also, do you think something that has possibly played in the decision of the players? I'm sure there were different clubs being approached, Lyon, Real Madrid, a crazy one, Angel City from the NWSL. Do you think that Bayern even putting promises of, recruiting good players, that it will assure that, Harder and Eriksson are able to come in and kind of also have that belief of, we're joining the squad that is definitely going to be taking it to the last bit of the Champions League. We want to come here and beat Wolfsburg and those very fine margin games. Is that something that the players and the club have discussed between each other? Because I mean, also they're coming from Chelsea. It's not they've won some ridiculous amount of trophies, always at the front run. They have come short here and there against some of the big teams in Europe, and I think even it's harder to compare it this season because they got matched up with Lyon and then Barcelona. That's a hard run regardless of who you're coming up against. And so it's almost that you can't blame Chelsea that these players are making way out because they want to win a Champions League. But would you reckon that has been something in their decision of moving to a club like Bayern?
I mean, I wasn't present at the negotiations, but
Yeah.
Bayern surely didn't promise them, like they can't promise them anything. What they can promise them is like a good amount of game time, a good environment, a good sporting environment, a good
Mm.
place to develop and to play. And I mean, of course, there's trophies to be won, and Bayern can definitely make it far in the Champions League, and that's something I'm pretty sure they have considered that. Given I mean, of course, Lyon is always a bit of a guarantee for winning trophies, and of course, winning the
Right.
Champions League, given how many titles they have won, it's crazy. But I think they've declined a bit recently
Yeah.
in their European performances, and I think Real Madrid are by far not at that level yet that they can compete for the title. And you also need to look at the ages of the players. They don't have that much time left, and
Mm.
I think if they really want to win that Champions League trophy, they need to come to a club like Bayern.
It's now or never, pretty much. I believe Eriksson's 29, Harder's 30, 2 3 year contracts. Do you reckon this is going to be like a long-term contract? Is it going to be one of those shorter ones where it's a year with maybe another year to extend, given that they're obviously not in the latter stages of their career, but certainly the last few big contracts that they'll be signing?
It's difficult to tell, but surely the contract length has played a role when deciding to what club to go, and I think like Bayern are not the club to offer a 1-year contract. 2 years is rare as well, so I think it's between 2 or 3 years.
Your contract, and that was the exact same contract that Harder was on and currently is on for Chelsea. Alina, and kind of like the last question of just let me know what you think. Is this the start of a very busy summer for Bayern? The World Cup is happening. There's going to be some crazy players that are either going to have their stock massively shoot up, possibly stock drop down. Is this the start of some big signings? What positions do you need to look at? There's players that are going to be departing. There's some players that possibly will push a departure when some of these names are coming in. I mean, how do you see that summer window happening?
I think it will be a very, very interesting summer window. I think goalkeeping position will be very interesting to see, because we've seen Janina Leipzig pull up some really, really good performances in England over there, and that didn't go unnoticed. And I'm pretty sure she has some offers from WSL clubs, but also still a contract running with Bayern until next year, next summer. And yeah, it will be interesting to see if she comes back, or if she comes back, will she be the number one again? Or what happens with Malagros? Like, will she be dropped to second position, or will she remain the starting goalkeeper? There were rumors that Laura Benkert, the current second goalkeeper, will be sold to Lyon, and we will see what happens with that one. And I think defense needs definitely more depth. Left side is sorted because Bayern announced Katharina Naschenweng in January. Austrian left back, great signing, great player. Can't wait to see her in summer. That will be great.
That's going to be fun.
Yes, definitely. And yeah, with Alina Eriksson, another center back. I think the current center back who played alongside Glodis Pelavigo, Tenara, she's always injured like in the second half of the season. That's something that needs to be looked at, and also like right back position is a big question mark. So we will see what happens with Ashley Lawrence.
Yep. Do you see possibly Eriksson slipping into that position? I mean, obviously sometimes she's had to play it kind of in a wing back or more of a three back line, depending with how Emma Hayes flexes them around. Is that an expectation where you think she'll be slipping into a position like that if the summer window doesn't guarantee a player like that for them?
I doubt it, to be honest, because we can really see that she feels most comfortable as left center back, and I think that's where Bayern plan her for.
Yeah, probably. Any final words for how you think Harder and Eriksson are gonna slip into this Bayern squad? How Bayern fans should be very, very excited for this one?
Yeah, they can be very excited for this transfer. I think it wasn't predictable that it would happen, and like having two players like that at Bayern is just crazy and a really statement signing, and just shows how big the ambitions are at the club and what they really want to achieve. And it's great to see that they have finally realized that it takes investments and really big game players to reach those big goals. And I think they will fit in very well at the club. It, of course, will take some time until they have fitted in and found the right position. And I think we shouldn't expect them to start like every game. It needs rotation, it needs breaks. We need to take care of the players. Players' welfare should be priority. And I think having a bigger squad, more options, so that Alexander Strauss, the head coach, can like play out his tactics better. That's really good, because I think we will definitely see a lot of shifts in formation, like having a back three, having a flexible back four, with a full back like going more on the wing, and like having three like defenders like at the back in position and in possession and stuff. I think it's really very interesting to see how everything plays out, and really curious to see who else joins in summer.
Yeah, another fan base that may not be so thrilled is Wolfsburg. I mean, how often do you see this happen where like a big name is going from one rival to another?
I mean, Bayern and Wolfsburg were really like, to compare, like for example, Chelsea and Arsenal. That's two completely different levels. Like it's not like in Germany, it's not like in England, and it's pretty common in the last years that players went from Bayern Munich to Wolfsburg, and everyone was like, of course, people were unhappy about it, but in the end, it just happened. It's a transfer that was made, and you can't do anything about it. But players, like former players, like there's a lot of Bayern Munich players
Yeah.
that have a history with Wolfsburg, obviously, but I think recently it didn't happen that players came from Wolfsburg to Bayern Munich, like even with a stop in between. And especially such a big player like Pernille Harder, that's pretty uncommon, but it's great to see and just shows that the Frauen-Bundesliga is still is an attractive league for players like them, and that's great to see, and it will only continue to grow.
It will only continue to grow. What a note to end that on. Alina,
Great.
how can people start reading up your stuff? Because you've, I mean, covered this pretty well. You've covered a lot of the transfers that are coming up. I know you've got some very good predictions of certain teams that are going to do certain signings. Where can everybody find your stuff and start reading on it?
Yeah, my Twitter is at Alina _RXP, and there you can find all my stuff basically.
There you go. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate
course.
it. It's going to be fun to see how it works out, and it'll be more interesting to revisit this conversation once they hopefully integrate into the team and see how it plays out.
Yes, thanks for having me.
Thank you.